don't worry, we're good.
Right here.
Oh, I gotta pull up my notes, so, for note taking here at the same time, so.
Are you
I feel like I should move myself because you.
4:00, you're not like anyone
Oh,
wants.
all right, there we go, I'll take that.
Give me a 4:02 started, that's okay.
Yeah.
If you're okay with that, shift myself here. Not that I need to be on camera,
All
but.
right, we are recording,
Okay.
so I'll just sit and listen and monitor to make sure it stays up.
Okay. Let me just pull up my notes and I'll be set. Totally set. I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Should we wait for Mark?
I think we're okay. Sure, yeah, we'll be good.
Okay, I'd like to call a meeting to order today, September 1st at 4:01 or 4:02 PM for the Finance and Budget Committee meeting. Our first order of business is synergistic training and out of travel request for Ms. Erdman. Go ahead, Angela.
Yes, as a part of our engagement and partnership with Synergistic, I serve in the role as a program liaison, and this is like Christopher is also the backup program liaison for the Synergistic program. And there's a training down in Dallas, Texas that helps me, work in the analytics program and understand how I can fully support in my role the partnership. So the training is from the 27th to the 29th. It's all expenses are paid through Synergistics, so it's at no cost to the district, but for our policy for out-of-state travel for administrators, it needs to be approved by the board. So I'm just asking for your approval.
And to clarify, this will be an approval for us to take a trip to full board.
Correct.
So do I have a motion?
Motion.
I'll second. All right, motion passes. Are there any questions? Okay, there being none, I'm going to run that out of order. But we're on to the next part, which is a preview of our revenue budget for the 21-22 school year. And this again will be information only.
Yes, and all of the handouts that I gave you and provided today are just, none of it is final. So that's one of the reasons I didn't have it posted in board book formally. The next round of drafts, like the revenue budget and the expenditures, I'll, post the drafts in there. If that's been the past practice, this is kind of our first round of this, and I'll say again, we have a lot of unknowns at this time yet. So what happens is a part of the full scope of what happens between now and the end of October. My role is to work within the business office with Mark and to just, and all the budget managers to put together a budget. So, the first step that I use and that we use as our tool is your revenue limit. And so you have this sheet, which is called revenue cap, that says on the top. We put what is our best guess at the time on that for most of the items that still are hanging up in the air. So, like the things that we, what we do right now, we have guesstimated that our count for students will be around 4950 is the number that we're using right now. We've had several students enrolled in the district lately, so it's nice to see that our numbers are coming up in that way. But the enrollment is one huge piece. We know that we are not receiving an increase per pupil on the revenue limit, so that is one factor that we know that we cannot increase that piece. And then like our operating referendum is listed in here, just how the pieces, sort of come together. We also, the other piece, the main piece that we estimate right now, and it's sort of midway down, private school voucher aid deduction. This is the amount we're able to add to the revenue limit, but it's expensed right out. So it helps us grow in our aid overall. But we don't have that final figure until October 15th. So as I said, we guess with these things that right now it's our best guess. We put together the preliminary budget, which the Finance and Budget Committee approves. And then we have the hearing for the budget on October 12th is the date that I think we're looking at, that it is this year, because it's before our October board meeting. And then on the 15th, 3 days later, we'll have the final numbers. So then what we'll have to do at that point is real quickly put in the final numbers, do the final tweaks to the budget, and then bring it to the full board for approval. So, and then we have to certify our tax levy by the beginning of November. So it's kind of interesting how it works, because it really, so we have like an approval, and like the budget hearing, the budget booklet and the presentation will be based off of non-final numbers, but they'll be very close. So these are the estimates that I'm going to be using for the assembly of the budgets, for the budget hearing.
So as far as per pupil counts, what is the absolute last day of when that metric would be established?
So our count is finalized, but the official count date is the third Friday in September. And then they do another count in January, but for budget purposes and for what will be finalized on here is the third Friday, where it's that's the dates that's counted statewide. And then Joyce Beckman, who leads our enrollment count, I work with her to finalize and work with the building secretaries to finalize everything. We work with our open enrollment coordinator, Terry York, will be working on that to finish up confirming how many ins and outs we have for enrollment. And then we file that about a week later, and then it's applied to the revenue limit. So at this time, it's looking like we have about 105 open enrollment students in and about 495 out. But there's been a lot of shifting, especially because of the blended model and virtual learning last year, where several of the students that were open enrolling out are coming back in. And then we have the new virtual academy. There's a lot of moving parts, I think, right now, more so, I think, than we've seen any other year. This is my first year here, so I can't speak to it, but Mark can. Maybe you're gonna add a couple.
Yeah, I know, as of, to kind of give you an example of where we're at, from enrollment standpoint, McKinley Charter School was about 65 kids on July 19th. They're over 130 today. Another example would be last year, our kindergarten, our 4K kiddos that were district-wide was 239 at this time last year. This year at 5K, it's 305. So we're seeing families come back to the extent, I'm not sure, as of Monday, we had 38 applications of families who wanted to come in either Friday or Monday that we're processing to put in schools. Like they came on Friday or Monday to enroll their kid in school. So it takes us a little bit of time to actually take your application, get the information in, put it into the school, request a record from the other school district. So those numbers will settle. We're estimating on that. Yeah, I think it has been absolutely different than any other year in terms of late enrollments and changes coming in. Now we obviously have kids leaving us, but I try to keep a tentative schedule, and from August 1st till August 24th, which was like last week Thursday, we're plus 78 students district-wide, and again, floating over there. So those are positive news. It's just the challenge in that as we look at just, are they going into places that we have adequate staffing, or are there things that we will need to do? And actually, I know HR committee is going to be making some requests specifically looking at our virtual learning model, only because we have some staffing needs that are special there that we just, when you add 60 people in 2.5 weeks, you're going to have some people need some help. So some positive there. I think the big piece that I look at from this, when I take away, is one, that our tax levy is likely about $1 million less this year than it was the year before. And what that means likely for our taxpayers is that we are likely going to see a institutional low in our net tax levy, something that we have likely not seen in many decades. Right now, if you look at that number, we're estimating $7.07 for our tax levy. To give you an idea where we were, it was $7.81 last year. The reason that is because we didn't get any per pupil aid, and so the state's increase means it's going to reduce the district, our taxpayers' levy, and that's where the savings is going to be. So we didn't, you're going to see zero increase in our per pupil aid and significant increase into the, I guess we call it property tax relief. So because of that, we likely are going to have a tax levy of something that we haven't seen since the 80s or 70s. So on one hand, you say that's great, right? I think that's pretty awesome. On the other hand, I don't know what that means for the years to come. Like, does that mean we're going to jump up in 2 years and people say, well, my goodness, you got a 40-cent increase on our levy? Well, again, we don't have tons to do with it, but we do have to celebrate when we can. That our net tax levy is going to be close to $7.10, $7, somewhere in that range.
What was it this past?
781, right? And again, years past, when we first started talking about referendums, it was, it was 880, and then down to 825, and then we talked about 821. So, we're significant.
Is that due in part to the city assessing all those valuations of property?
Actually, it really has more to do with the state is providing us with more money, okay, that to the public school, in this case, the Manitowoc. It's some to do with that, but the property value in the Manitowoc property value is really, according to the state, compared to what everybody else's property value is. So if you actually look at the increase for the city of Manitowoc, it was a 3.8% increase, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they bumped up considerably.
So, but,
Yeah.
is it 3.8?
Well, for this year, it's 5.7.
5.7.
And this, just to point out that what he's wrapping now, this is, like I said, all these documents that have like the Baird stuff on it is all tentative, but this is kind of like we received this to help us start building our budgets, and, just the preliminary equalized value. So that's where they kind of norm everyone across the states.
Right, so the answer to your question is yes, it helps, but that helps a few cents, right? What we're seeing is $1 million in the reduction of our levy, knowing that $2 million is going to private school vouchers, which is an increase from $1.9 million the year before. So we're increasing our likely payment that goes out. We're reducing our overall payment, which means that, if our dollar amount stays the same, the state's backfilling that so that our levy can be lower. So that's where the legislature's model of, we're not going to give money to schools, we're going to give it to taxpayer relief. And that's what we're seeing right here to a historic extent. Historic extent. So, again, we'll see in the end where it falls out, but that's, it's an interesting component. I mean, it just is.
Now, just to point out too, just with the other handouts, the one that says levy and mill rate and has this kind of long bar on it. Some of this forecast model is a tool that I've started using since I arrived in the district, and it'll show like a projected mill rate that goes in the $6 range. I'll just tell you that there's a lot that's not plugged into the model, that this is not any firm indication of what's coming up in ahead. It's based on things that are in the model for this year, so just don't take that as the gospel. It's according to the MPSD. That's just kind of, there's some other figures in there, but I just did want to show, it has like a tax levy analysis on the top, and we can, what I can bring, I guess I want to show you something like this too, to show you that these are the kinds of tools where we can tweak this, and we can put some things in there to try to feel like we can get a better grasp on what the future years will look like. So, and on this, it says like current year would be last fiscal year, because it's the model that we used last year, but we work with Baird now, and that they help a lot with that. It's very nice. And then the other one that I just included was the property value, which is on the one Baird sheet, but then like how it would be affected by municipality. We were talking to Newton, for example, their value has increased 8, 9% the last 2-3 years, but then only went up 2% this year. So it always is fluctuating, and I think the lowest value of increase is 2% with Newton, and then the highest increase this year is 8% with Atomic Pursuit. So it's all, it depends upon a lot of things. So that's that. And then, like I said, we use kind of that overall levy amount to plug that into our budget and our total revenue limits overall. And, what I provided you was a list of what our initial revenue budget will be. And, some things on here on the first page where it shows the property taxes, that's just the tentative amounts for that. Then there are a lot of things on this page that really, really depend upon the year. So when I, discussed with our bookkeeper today, like, oh, this is what I'm thinking of putting in there. We didn't look at last year's numbers because last year was such an atypical year. We looked at 2 years ago to come up with a lot of this. So, I'm not gonna go through every single line. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I guess, if you come up with questions between, as you review this, please let me know. I'm happy to answer questions anytime on any of it. If you look on the, so like the top part of the first page is the levy broken down between all the municipalities. If you look at page 2, there's a $36 million line. That's our equalization aid. That's the aid from the state, and that was around, 35 million last year, or 34 or 35 million. That's up to 36, almost up to 37 million. So as Mark had pointed out, that really swings a lot, especially when it impacts the levy. So then below that, we have kind of in the middle of the page, and this kind of will dovetail into the CARES and ESSER updates. We put in like amounts that we have left for CARES, years, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. We're just putting in 2.5 million for our ESSER 2 allocation. Really, we have like $3.3 million total for that, I believe. And then we have 7.5 million available for ESSER 3, but we're in our plan to spread that out over the years. We're gonna start with putting 2.5 million in there. We may adjust that, when I work with Mark to finalize the budget on that. So, then we have there's a lot of grants that come through with the titles, all the title funding. So then we're able to look on WISE grants now and kind of look at what our balances are for spending in those areas. And that's how those numbers are derived.
Question of the grants, as far as the grants go, do we have an individual who actively seeks out more grants that are available to us? Like I know a lot of times in companies, they're business managers, et cetera. Do we have a person that's directly associated or that is their job scope? That's what entirely you?
Yes, yeah, so like we have some other opportunities that'll come here and there, I shouldn't say it's just me, because there'll be different, depending upon the areas, different opportunities that we'll have, but a lot of times that'll be my role to assist and help with it. So for example, we have an FCC grant or money that we're able to apply for through what's called USAF, which is the E-rate program. And so, that money, we can, with virtual learning, we were able to put in a request for Chromebooks for all of the virtual learning students at McKinley. So that was, a large extra, amount of money that we were able to put in for that. Sometimes with those programs, I think with that one specifically, we're waiting to hear back. We put in the application and we may never have an in and out. It might just be paid through the federal government and they take care of it. Sometimes we do have to pay ahead and then claim. So like with E-rate in general, which is we get discounts for our internet and our fiber for our internet. But Manitowoc Public Utilities will have us pay for the whole year and then apply for a refund, where Wisconsin, who does our internet, would give us a discount upfront. So all of those programs have little nuances to them. So
one of the things that is also available to us, we use it occasionally, is our CISA has our ability to pay for a grant for someone who's going to help us with some of those very specific ones. But there's a lot of grants that are out there that we utilize that we're eligible for, we just have to complete the paperwork. So an example might be, through the Rising Phoenix program, we can get reimbursed in a grant format for some of the higher learning expenses that our students are having. If we don't have students in higher ed, or you don't fill out the application for the grant, you don't get the money. But if you do, there's a state fund that basically has X amount of dollars, and they divvy it equally among the school districts based on each student. So there's a lot of those that Angela and her team works with to make sure that we're seeking the reimbursement that we're eligible for. And then there's a few others, like a year or so ago, maybe Lisa, you remember Joanne Metzen wrote a grant for a van. And we received, so her department wrote a van grant. We received the vans to transport some special education students to work site places. So that was a different model, like her and her team wrote that grant. And then the other grant that is occasionally written by districts would be like a Healthy Schools grant. And those work through some federal funds where usually you see it in FIED or activities that is a significant, a lot of times then you might hire somebody to do that. But we don't have an individual like a grant writer or a position. But we do have the ability to talk to CISA and ask them for, like, and again, they usually take a percentage of the grant that you need to pay them. So they're real interested in $1 million grants because they take a percentage as opposed to $13,000 grants, which they take a percentage, so.
Grant writing is a lot of work. I wrote a grant for a landscape project over at Washington Middle School, and that was a lot of work. We
Right.
didn't get it, but it's a
Right.
lot of work.
And at times, it's helpful to have somebody from the outside who just does that and they know all the, like, how to go about doing it, but we try to incorporate that within our teams as much as we can.
Yeah, I think like the CTE grant would be another example, like
Right.
CISA 6 assists with that. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many resources through grants our students here, how many extra opportunities are given through, the different grants. And it's nice that they're focused in their mission so that what they want, we can't just take the money in and use it for what we want. We have to report on it and be very, very transparent about how we do it, which is how it should be. So, at the end of, there are not any like major things to point out. A lot of times we get at the end of the second page, a dividend for workers' comp that's gone down over the years because we're looking to improve some of that. Interest, where we usually can look forward to making more interest on our bank accounts. It's horrible right now, so we guesstimated what our transfer will be from Fund 10 to Fund 27. That's, we use 28.2% for this next year for the aid amount, and then it'll be 30% next year. So I'm on page 4 right now. And then, special ed aid overall, we took a guess on high cost aid, transition incentive grants. And we have just other than, those are state source grants, and then we have federal grants for special education as well.
See, Angela, thanks for pausing for 1 minute, just in the head. So if you want to advocate with our legislatures, this is the number that we're using, $8.8 million from our Fund 10 goes to Fund 27 to support federal regulated IEPs. I mean, we must do that. We're transferring $8.8 million. So if a state government says we're going to move 3%, right? 1% is 88,000, so it's like 300,000. So if in fact they ever move to what they promised, the 60% range, that's significant dollars that doesn't get transferred into Fund 27 from 10, and we can then use it. It is absolutely a critical key for us moving forward. So if we can, if you're ever talking with one of our legislators and say, hey, what is one thing that we can do? If you can pay for your, again, the old model, fair share of special education, right now we're estimating 28. If they moved to 60% or even 50, we'd be talking about a $4 million reduction in that transfer, which would stay in our overall budget. And again, I say that's equal across the board to every school district, because every school district has a model that, they're gonna have to put into the special education fund. But we have no choice, like, we have to support that. And, I just wanna say that that's just another expense.
I guess speaking to that, you said 60% is what was promised. Do they currently have on their, is there a promise that's out there that they are supposed to provide up to 60% towards?
Well, you heard the old model of 2/3 funding, right? So they're a long ways away, and I don't see that happening. But right now, the budget moved from 27 to 30, right? And again, when we see the previous governor's budget making a model down the road to increase the special education aid, that's how it absolutely helps support us, because they're only supporting 27 to 30%. And if we got to 50%, right, that's a 20% increase, which would mean that a 20% reduction in our expenditure or transfer, right? So if you take 20% of, 8.8 million, I always say the Mark Holzman math is $800,000 for 10%. You double that, right? You get 20%. Talking about like $1.7 million that we would then be able to utilize in our own budget, not transfer, and have very specific uses for it.
But where does the 60% come from that you?
The state government then, and again, in this model, rather than giving all of that money to across the state for, in this case, property tax relief, we'd say, hold the line on taxes, we're gonna give more money to special education relief. Therefore, the state's then payment would be greater in special education than it currently is. Does that make sense? So right now, we're spending 14 million of it, 8 of it's our own money. So we're saying, hey, right now it's 30, could you shift it to 35? I mean, anything else. But they're just a long ways away from even being. And again, the model historically probably was small amounts, not as many students, not as many specific programs, not as many expenses. But as that moves forward, it's difficult, so. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, that's great. Yeah, it was like a $10 million, something that Margo and I used today to come up with that 2.9. So that's where, that would, essentially that much will come off of what, Mark was saying. So that it would be huge impact. So yeah, so we have like the state aids that are above. I mean, I know when you look at these reports, you have several longer line items in the description, and then it'll say like 6 revenue from state sources, so that'll kind of sum up. And then below that are all of the federal source aids, so that's like our flow through, our IDEA, our preschool, so our IDEA, so that's all comes through that. So yeah, that's where we're at for special ed. I should back up, I kind of skipped over this, but for Fund 21, on the previous page, I put $500 in there for interest, but really for Fund 21, it's just to help you recall what we've talked about before. That's the special gifts and programs fund, and so that's really all of your fundraisers. So we don't bank on or like use up for any of our operating expenses money off of Fund 21, so we will always budget 0 for like our revenues in general, because that's just money that's set aside for the clubs and activities that have those accounts established. For Fund 38, that we move on to page 5, that is our debt service payment totals for the year. We'll see an imbalance this year with our revenues are going to be from what we bring in from the levy and aid, $1.1 million of our debt payments, but then we have some money in a sinking fund because our debt service is callable. And what that means is we can pay ahead on it at this point. And so the good news that we figured out is that we will be able to basically advance ourselves about 1 fiscal year from getting out of debt. It's to give us a significant amount of action. So what you'll see is we'll have more expenditure than the revenue on Fund 38, but that's why, because we have the money that's in the fund, and then, we save on the interest, which makes all the sense in the world to get ahead on.
So how much is the interest that we're paying?
we pay about $40,000, like 2 times a year on the interest. So it's significant. So we'll, I think we would just have this fiscal year and the next fiscal year on our debt, and then it'll fall off, so which is wonderful. More, I know Colin had asked about this last time too, and, I'm trying to think, Mike Clark that we work with at Baird, he was talking about, or actually the auditors were saying, they've very rarely ever seen a district that does not have any debt. It's more normal than that to be in a case like that, so. But we'll have options to kind of establish and evaluate projects that we want to take on or how we want to handle things, so. It's a good thing for our district, so. Let me see here, Fund 38 we went over. Next one on here, just looking at it kind of printed out. For Fund 41, we don't have anything in there. The next page, page 8, that you'd want to take a look at is our Fund 46. We have just our interest in there. At the end, Fund 46, if you recall, is the fund where we're able to, like if we, at the end of the year, we say like we have extra money that's unspent or the timing of it doesn't work to spend it, especially because the end of the year is here, we can't get it spent by June 30th. We always have until July 30th to move money into 46, and then it's into Fund 46, and then it's gated. We always want to maximize what we, have in our budgets and try to not leave anything unspent so that we can get it to maximize our aid. So, so we don't, we don't know we don't know how much we're going to put into there until the end of the year. So. Then the last page, page 10 goes over Fund 50, and that is the food service fund. Food service fund, will really benefit again this year because we're receiving assistance from what's called the Summer Food Service Program. Instead of giving each student just like one lunch or breakfast, well, the breakfast is all the same, I believe, but then the lunch, they get more options this year. So we're still going to receive a higher amount of aid. We'll probably have more expenditures, so we, our fund balance won't grow quite as much, but we'll still bring in a nice amount that we can work ahead on buying some extra equipment and stuff that we're not always able to do sort of under the regular operations of the food service program. So, we kind of guesstimated our numbers here, looked at 2 years prior data, so we could make our best guess.
So what kind of equipment are we looking at, thinking about for food service? What do they need right now?
Lincoln High School, for example, has a dishwasher that needs replacing. Very recently, we bought 2 stoves. One went from moved from Wilson over to Riverview, and just I think there were some other ovens, reheating ovens for the schools that help us keep the food warm. It's all prepared over at MSC. So, to think at this point, I believe it was 2004 when the food service program was started. So all of the equipment is about 20 years old now. So we're really, we need to work, and every year we usually write a grant from what I understand. I can't take credit for it, but Janelle will, it's like a little small grant, and I think we put $4,000 in for that. Where she can write a grant for a large piece of equipment and take one off the list and that gets paid through the state if we are awarded that. One less thing for us to have to purchase. So, Janelle Schultz, our food service director, does a fabulous job kind of planning and thinking and envisioning about what we need. So, and we always have to make sure food service has a positive fund balance. We can't let it go negative. So, we're in really great shape there to make improvements and upgrades, and it's in a good spot right now. Yeah, that's all I have for now on the revenue budget. So
Looks great, Angela.
yeah, thank you.
We're very fiscally responsible. These reports are great.
Oh.
We're spending the money wisely.
Thank you. So, and if you think of any questions along the way, let me know. I don't know if we put the E-rate amounts on there, so I gotta just take a look at that, but we'll, I'll just, but thank you. Any other?
Okay, and then, so do you have any other updates with the ESSER CARES funds?
Well, the funds or the balances that I shared are, just on an overall global perspective is kind of where we're at with budgeting for CARES. We continue to work with the private schools, a lot of them are renewing subscription type things. We've been looking at, purchasing some more support or equipment and stuff to support if we have students at home learning, and I think they'll talk to that.
Yeah, so again, I think we try to break out the ESSER 2 and 3's funding into a 3-year cycle, this being year 1. So we want to make sure that if we added some staff, we talked about, there's some earlier elementary grade level teachers that we added, some math coaches, I think we added a counselor recently. Some of those staffing pieces, we want to make sure that we can facilitate for the years moving forward. And there's other things that we'll bring back and talk about, do we want to do it again? Like we added 2 days or 2-point-something days. I think it was $300-something thousand. I'm not sure if we're going to do that again. Let's see how it goes before we absolutely say we're going to do that again. But there's some other pieces of things that we're looking at. And so some of it's equipment, and we talked about Chromebooks and the need for that. But Chromebooks are very inexpensive in terms of the technology, but they're also, as we see here, need upgrades on it. So we're trying to make sure that we're working through those. There's some other ideas that we have of things that likely we need, but we haven't purchased in the past that we're considering. So, for example, one of those ideas would be a van for the district to help transport and pick up kids for various reasons. They're expensive. We don't always have the initial dollars to do that. The CARES dollars can help us with that. So we're trying to look at, now's not an ideal time to buy a vehicle, but is that something that we can do and look at so that we can utilize that? Once we purchase that, then we would only have to put the gas and the insurance and the upkeep. Years down the road, we wouldn't have to actually pay for them. So I think those are some of the things that would be helpful. It's just that, when we did the van, for example, for special ed, we now have a process on how to insure people, what it looks like, and all those pieces. But there's some other logistics like, well, where are we going to store them? And who moves them when it snows? And just, what is legal? So those are some of the pieces that, we're just working through now. And then we'll have another recommendation for probably April-ish that we'll say, okay, here's what year 2 looks like for our expenditures. And here's what we're going to continue, here's what we're going to discontinue, and here's what we're going to add. And those conversations just go all the time. And Angela and her team are very helpful on looking at the process and saying, yep, this is something that would qualify, and not sure that would be.
Where are we at with the air exchange systems that we talked about upgrading?
Yeah, so that is ongoing right now. So we
Okay.
continue to see, we've already, some of the buildings are working on that. I think Chris uses the term moving from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. So the example would be in this building, we have the ability to look at every fan that moves air through our ducts. In our other buildings, it is very limited. There's a few fans that we can see. When I say there's a computer program that looks up, and so we can see how much air exchange is moving. The answer always is, it's really simple in the fall and in the spring because you're not heating or cooling any of the air really. I mean, here we do have some air conditioning, but most of our buildings have very little. And because we're not heating the air, we bring a bunch of air in and we move it through and we put it out. When you start after heating that air, the amount that you can come in has to pause so that you can heat it before you can push it through to the buildings. That's when those efficiency pieces will become really, really helpful, because we'll be able to see what fans are working really well and what ones aren't. And again, the process I said to a team in staff meeting this morning in this building, our newest building is 1991. So when you're pushing air through 50, 60, 70, and 100-year-old buildings, the ducts work well, but maybe the windows and the walls aren't what they used to be. So it's not going to be ideal, but it's going to be much better. We hope to have this completed by September of, I think, this 2022 is what our goal is. So they can work on those as the year goes on, less when we're starting to heat it, because they'll, then you got to shut off to make it work. But they're doing work right now at all of our buildings, and well, not all. At certain buildings, I don't have in front of me the landscape, but our goal is to get that done by a year.
So, is there any other questions anyone has for Angela? I think that's it for our agenda, correct?
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
You know, I guess, can I just add to, I mean, I should, I don't know if, does it work for everyone to do a September 22nd meeting? I don't know if you got a chance, I know I heard for Lisa it doesn't work. And then, but that would be our target date to present the full,
This should be okay.
you
I
know,
don't see any objection there.
I think it'll be fine.
okay?
I don't know, which things are, so September 22nd, 4 o'clock again,
Yeah, if that's all right with all of you.
okay?
I'll get an official invite out.
Okay, with that, I believe I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned, thank you.
Great.
Welcome. You, 4:41. Remember to note the time.